wasn't fast enough and I turned it off. Okay, so here's the light, medium, dark. You don't have to have all of them in every drawing, but it would be good to have one from each of these categories in your drawing. If you have all this and no lights, it's going to read kind of flat. If you have all darks, now these could even be closer together in value. That's quite a bit of difference between these two. So, I can come back and fine tune this a little bit, but just to give you an idea, light, medium, and dark, if you don't have darks, it's not going to show up your lights. And sometimes, like that painting I was just referring to back there, that middle leaf that just disappears into the background on the right side, it disappears in the background because the value of that leaf and the value of the background is too similar. So the leaves are in the front. You see how I have dark underneath those leaves to push that leaf forward. So if I don't have enough darks, my lights aren't going to show. When I painted the sunflower part, the petals at the top, they were all too light, and I've got to go back. I've already added some dark shadows, or they're kind of medium shadows in between the petals. But until I did that, it all looked flat. It was all the same color. So this translates into paintings too. And Suzanne was asking me, how do I get the paintings to glow? And if I know where my light is, my light, everything from here over, maybe 1 through 4, I'm going to make sure the color that I paint it is in that value range, and that there's warmth there. Because if I want to show light, I want to show some warmth. It might be a cool light. That's a whole nother lesson. I could get way involved in that. Okay, so we'll move on. Cool, warm, that's, we don't have to deal with that with black and white. All right, so what we have here is a value. This is called a value scale. All right, this is when we can blend. This is when I just call it blending, because you either use your pencil to blend or you have the stump to blend, etc. All right, this next one is crosshatch. Crosshatching. Crosshatching is done primarily with pen, but you can do it with pencil as well. But when you use pen, you don't blend pen. So I'm going to shift to a pen as soon as I pick up the whole bag that I had earlier. There they are. If you don't have a pen and want to use a pen for this, feel free to grab one out of the bag. There are so many different ones.
Do we just need one?
You just
like
need
that
one?
Fine marker?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Pen?
I got plenty, thank you.
So, and you can do this in pencil too. But again, because you cannot blend a pen unless you have a water-soluble pen and you blend it with water later, this is a method. So, obviously, if this is white, I'm through with that. Okay? Now, I'm working with a jet black pen. So how am I going to show the variation here? Now, first of all, very light touch. Now, so I might do very light touch and go in one direction. And then I might do a very light touch and go in 2 directions. So visually, when I step back, it's getting darker. So the next one, I'll get a little closer. Closer. And I can just go zigzag back and forth. But do you see how I'm getting darker and darker? It's just because it's kind of like science. You have molecules that are gas and they're far apart, and then they get closer together, so it's a liquid, and they get closer together and eventually make a solid. So It's like, you know, you're eventually going to make a solid, but you're not there yet. So I might bear down a little harder. I might just overlap. I can go at angles. See when I added another angle, how it started to fill in more? So this, and it can just be, some people just prefer it like this, a zigzag back and forth. But back up and look, squint, and make sure that you see them getting a little darker each time. So even when you work with pen and ink, you can get shadow and shading just by overlapping your lines. And then this last one would be filled in solid. I've even done value strips with Zentangle designs, and that's kind of fun. So if you want a really dark design, you pick something that has a lot of dark background and maybe very little light, and then you create different designs to where maybe the first one has just line designs and nothing solid in it. So like I did that cross, this one. So if like this would be one, would be a dark design, it probably would be like number 8 because there's still a lot of light in it. And maybe even the words could be like a number 2 or 3. But by adding different patterns and details, and you, of course with this I also shifted between different pen sizes. But you can see how some of these have different values. Some of them are darker than others, lighter than others.
Did you use a ruler for a lot of that, or did you do it?
Oh yes, I did. Rulers are good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with using tools. There's times when a tool simplifies it. But I don't want you to be so hung up on straight lines that if you're out sketching something that you have to have a ruler or you have to have a compass. You want to be able to develop a comfort in doing some freehand sketching. But if you want some real accuracy and diagonal lines, when I use a linear perspective, I always use a ruler. Well, unless I'm sketching. So always is not correct. Okay, this next one, Pointillism. Pointillism. This is the one that you'll either love or you'll hate. I found it very therapeutic. Pointillism is when you're only using the tip point of your pen to create value. If you'll go to your handouts, it's actually in the next week's handout, but this week kind of covered a variety of things, and these are mainly just sorted by topic. If you hate snakes, I'm sorry. But I just happen to have this as a pattern. Okay, so this, mine got a line in it, so I tried to get rid of that line. This is the beginning of a pointillism exercise. Notice there's no line, there's just dots. Those dots create lines. Okay? This, ooh, did I not give it to you? Did I give you a completed one? Mm-hmm. Do you have one that's completed? Mm-hmm. No, that's your reference on how to complete it.
The deer carry?
No. Okay, this is how to complete it, but you see there's lines on this one. I had a student's work, I'll look it up in a minute, that did a pointillism of this, and no, this is the beginning of it. So what you'll do with that is you'll use this to know where the darks are going to be. And where the darks are going to be, you'll put your dots really close together. I'm barely picking up and moving my pen where I want it fairly dark. I'm going to see how, but you see how that's beginning to create some shadow? If I want that really dark, which I do because it's going to go behind that stick, then I'm just going to keep tapping very lightly. But all the dots should be about the same size. Whatever size of dot your pen makes is what that pen the color, the size. Don't do this. Don't draw dots and make it bigger. That's not pointillism. This I did not do, but this is a pointillism picture that took about 6 months. A parent of mine that I taught his daughter in elementary school, and he volunteered one day and brought in his pointillism for our Friday art days, and I never have had the patience to do anything that quite that detailed. Mine is much simpler than that.
That took him 6 months?
6 months.
Wow.
So here's mine. I really like to do trees in pointillism. You just find the shadow of, the side of the tree and go from there. And where the shadow is, you make it a little heavier. Where it isn't, you leave it more open and like I said, the molecules a minute ago, they're further apart.
Do you use the same pen the whole
On
way
this
through?
one I did. I believe he used multiple pens on this one because when I look at it, I don't know, maybe he didn't, I didn't ask, but see, his pen was littler than this one was.
Yeah,
Wow.
So it would be like a micro pen.
right.
But what kills me too is you look down here where, I know it's hard to see with the video, but the branches here, and you've got your own copies, he went around the branches and put dots in the negative space
Yeah.
to leave the white of the branches, which is, oh my goodness, that's just, it's just incredible to me. But what I want you to do on your chart, and this would be a homework assignment if you so want to try it, is you're going to do with pointillism, kind of like we did those. That might be number 2 because I just have a few dots. This one, I'd put some more dots. So the main thing is if you squint at it and from a distance, this piece is darker than this one. The one that'll just take way too much time for class is making a really dark one. So you can do this later, or when if you have a doctor's appointment and you want to fill your time. But see how I'm staying close to one area and just trying to barely move and fill it in, moving out. So from a distance that looks pretty dark, but it is definitely not solid. So you don't have to fill in these whole squares. Don't think you have to do that to get the idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm going to let you work on that a minute. I'm going to go see if I can find that student's work real quick. She was an 8th grader that I was so excited about it, she let me keep hers. And I made copies of it. She's now graduated and in college now.
You have to be one of those people that want to be doing something like that. TV's on, you're doing something, just hanging I love looking at them, especially the colors.
All right, that's hers. So I thought she did really well. But a lot of students did well. And they found that this to be really kind of mind-numbing and therapeutic in a good way. You just barely, I mean, it's like a teeny tiny movement of your hand. You barely lift up. Like those, like you two are using your whole arms. I would just probably just barely move from my wrist up. You're going to be really tired. But if, and you also, you don't want to slam your points down because you'll eventually, wear them down. But it's just, if it's a felt tip, you just barely have to touch for that to transfer. But again, if you end up working in ink in any way, your ways of shading in ink are either crosshatching or pointillism. And but you can also use pointillism and crosshatching with pencil. It's just not used as often. Okay, y'all got that? You can finish that for homework if you so choose to. What I want you to do now is go back to the, get your compass out, and you can either look at this one, which has a small version of your enlarged piece. I'm going to use it because it's smaller, and then I can draw below it. I'm not going to do my value strip. I've already done that. But I want us to work on this, and we're going to do it in pencil. You can come back and try it in pointillism. You can try it in whatever you want. But I'm going to use my sketchbook. I'm just going to put it up right under here. If you want to make it the same size of that, you can, or it can be slightly different. I'm going to start off with my circle. Make sure you can see it. Okay, so now I have this nice lovely circle. Try to draw your circle as light as possible, because when you look at this part right here, that you don't want your circle to be any darker than that part right there. So if I made it a little too dark to start with, before I'd add anything else, I can always kind of lighten it up. We're going to work in pencil. If you want to work in pen, I don't care. We're going to do this one in pencil. Okay? About halfway through your circle, you're going to draw that horizon line that's in the back of your page. And then just make a well, that wasn't even straight. Make a rectangle to kind of fill in your space. I'm not doing this real large because it'll take more class time if we do it large. If you do yours large, that's fine. You'll just end up finishing it for homework. And what shape is that shadow? It's either it's hard to say. Was it an oval or is it an ellipse? Yeah. I would probably, I don't know, one or the other. Does it matter if you have the right name? No. So all I'm doing there is I'm looking at my reference point. I'm looking at, okay, the thickness of the space here from that line. See, I did that about halfway. That's about halfway through the circle. So about this shadow is thinner than this light. So I'm just going to kind of mark where I would begin the shadow, kind of like we did the other day, and I'm going to draw it out. And I don't want a heavy outline on a shadow. You don't, you don't want to draw your shadow so dark that the edge of your shadow is darker than your shadow. Because we're not creating coloring books. So that's one reason why we want our lines to begin with that are going to be very light. You want them dark enough you can see them, but not so dark that it looks like you're filling in a coloring book. All right, look up at me when you have that drawn. You doing okay, Judy? Oh, I need to double up on the homework this week, right? I'm gonna be gone 2 weeks. No, I'm not. Y'all can explore what's in your book and do some things on your own. Yeah, looking good. Okay, before we start shading, I want you to pay attention a little bit to, if you'll look right up here, if you're not through, I want you to see that there is light between the sphere and the shadow. That's reflected light. And one of the most common mistakes when drawing, coloring, shading in things that are round is people forget to, now it might not always be this bright. For example, over here, it's pretty dark, but well, you can hardly see it on the screen. But there is a little more light here than there is here. The very outside of a rounded object is usually not the darkest dark. So I think of it that way. So we can start by creating the background. Because most of this is dark, I'm just going to pick up my 6B pencil. Wherever it went. There it is. And I'm going to just shade with it because it's going to give me a fairly dark edge without me having to press down very hard. So if you'll just watch a little bit, then I'll leave it to y'all to do your own thing. And whether you blend it with a blending stump or not is up to you. This one's really not blended because you can see the texture of the paper coming through. A lot of that will be determined by what style you like. And feel free to move your paper around, whatever makes it comfortable for you to get to things. So I know this is really dark, so I'm going to start laying in on the outside of this circle. This is my 6B. But what we just did on that, trying to control the gradual transition, should help you with these drawings. And it might show darker from the video than what it actually is. But I want you to notice a couple of things. I kind of created a line there when I went this direction. So I want to blur that out so I go a different direction and angle it out. So I want to make that more gradual. I don't want to create a halo around something. So you have to be careful, you know, when you do things like that. Like there's a little, you see the little halo there? So maybe come at a different direction and blend out. Or by,
Blending tool help that if you want.
Oh, yeah.
Help, that would
Yeah.
help.
yeah. And so as I come over on this side, I don't press as hard because it's lighter. So I'm just coming to the edge. I'm barely touching, but I have the pencil kind of laid down so I can get a fairly wide
So that's
lane.
graphite.
This is graphite. All right, so now what I'm looking for in this is I want to create a drawing where I give you the illusion of volume without line. Okay, so I'm trying to camouflage my line. That's why I started with my line really light. Right now I can't see the line. You see the edge because of change of value. You see the edge because of change of value. I can see the lines here, but I haven't gotten there yet. See what I'm talking about? Okay, y'all try the top part. Oh. Yes, ma'am.
You have another one, Carrie?
Yeah, the duct tape, I don't know if I've told y'all, when I go to workshops and everybody has the same products, you know, if everybody bought this Primo Elite Grande, well, I have a certain duct tape that I tear and cut and I try to put on the things that I might share. And that way it's an easy way, when you see it, you go, oops, I accidentally took one of hers home. If it has SpongeBob on it, I'm not a big SpongeBob fan. It's what the duct tape that was left over. You know, I had 11 ladies pick the duct tape they wanted, and they left that one. I can't imagine. But it works, and I have a variety of patterns that I use. But it's a super way to identify your materials without having to try. You know, some things I can write my name on, but I do that on my paint brushes as well. Makes it really easy to do it, to identify who it belongs to. Let me go sharpen some of these. Oops, I picked it up and didn't have my bifocals quite lined up. Oh, that's what an eraser's for.